There's a video on YouTube by Wildland Fire LLC, which means it's Limited Liability Corporation. That means it doesn't assume any responsibility or accountability for any of its folks that they put out on the fire line or out in law enforcement that ends up being killed or injured in the performance of their duty as machines, NPCs, non-player characters, or if you will, cybernetic units, versions of cybernetics, the inorganic QI, quantum interface with alien machinery, phantom timeline zones. So in this particular case, I was watching this video a little while ago, and they have certain ways in which they invert numbers as energy using alphanumerical formatting. And this is particularly true and why I've covered it before. And you can take a look at that particular video, which was called Why They Were Entrapped. E-N. And that's significant about the word E, right, which is 5, and then N, 5N, trapped. And then you can sort of plug into that consciousness traps, plug into that Enki and Enlil, okay? The Draco and Anunnaki. Then you can get into Skynet. And then what happens when we burn through all the lines of communication that represents their network, now their network cannot be rebuilt by the quantum cybernetic architecture. Now it's all being exposed. Now people are able to see it for what it is because they couldn't see it before. Now they see it. Now they don't. Now they see it. Now they knew, whoa. All their secrets of how they were using quantum technology, artificial intelligence, machinery, in which to build false layers, which is a false reality that I knew at 4 years of age. Actually, I knew it before I came in here. Or if you will, before I became aware of being in this, when I had it up and running pretty darn fast in 1955. I was born in 51, but my mother said I had it up and running very fast. You know, so in other words, she was observing me, and then she's sharing with me what she was observing of me in her mirror. Oh, thanks, Mom. Another source of information that was observing what it is I'm aware of. Now she's aware of what I was aware of by observing what I'm aware of in her. See how that works? Mirror, mirror on the wall, who's the fairest of them all that. So the reason I went and looked at this is because of the way that the letters and the alphanumerical formatting works, what they will experience, because here's something else you might want to make a quantitative and qualitative assessment between acid and alkaline, for example. Or if you will, the difference between those that are a monopole, like myself, that's running at a higher rate of eternal speed, right, which is a mated chip, right, which means that's full restoration back into zero, which means time doesn't exist for us. And then those that operate in time density realms, like here. Okay, so what that means is that your state of consciousness is outside time as an observer. So it's like mapping all the lines of communication that are being experienced by all the terminals, which represent all the software computer terminals that are communicating with each other, what they're all experiencing mathematically and visually on the graphical formatting terrain, the GUI, the graphical user interface, right? So I'll give you an example. In 1970 was when they developed what was known as fire scope. Fire scope. Scope the fire. And because I know the history, which is the reason why I was there and which I was supposed to experience what I'm learning from at the same time. So now you get into the numbers game of 7 and 0, 70, which was at that year considered to be the worst year in the history of wildland firefighting, okay, for CAL FIRE, or both agencies, actually all the agencies in the state of California, because they had lost more money. Now you're into the insurance business. Now you're into BlackRock, Black Eagle, right, Black Dragons, Black Hearts, Black Mirrors, Black Sun, right, inverters. And how this plays out, because what we use, remember, we know this, we create worlds out of what love is. They destroy what it is that we create. Now you're into recycling centers. recycle the garbage. Now you're into xenobots, right? Because I went into the environmental engineering field, which means they were coming up with technology that they could use to get rid of the stuff that they generate, which is toxic. So they're toxic generators. Their state of consciousness generates toxins. Okay? So when you are what love is, you experience their toxins. Okay? So you realize that they're infected. They're running bugs in their system. So you realize they're infected. If you got a bug in your computer, that's an infection. You know what a bug is, right? That means your system doesn't work right, the right way, as it was originally intended. Now scale that up to a universal template. Bugs. Yeah, bugs like in Bugs Bunny. Remember the rabbit with the clock? Everything's cross-indexed through all the compartmentalization of what's held in memory using QI to do it. Right? So it can rearrange the words as long as it can keep your consciousness trapped into that same system by rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic. Till we're using a pure light, which is pure fire, which is eternity, runs faster than it. Because when eternity shows up, when a monopole shows up, bang, it's grounded, burned through all those lines of communication. Right? So everything that it was being held in memory, running these simulations, as if it could just keep running these simulations until hell freezes over. Right? Reset the processing clock because it runs on a time clock. See? So just reset the clock, like on any processor. Reset the clock. Reset the chip. Right? Do memory wipe. Reset the chip. Now they're not going to know the difference. There is one that knows the difference. The one. That's eternity. There is no time. Okay? That's the real reset, which is called return to fire. Because it's fire that burns off all their goo, that holds consciousness captive to a Skynet, which are all the layers of their fakery. So imagine you told a 4-year-old child, hey, guess what, little one? You know this reality that you're living in? It's a simulator. It's not real. It's fake. Well, where's the real universe? Where'd it go? What are you experiencing in your heart? Are you experiencing what love is? Yeah. Well, that's the real universe. Ah, okay, so the universe is inside of me. That's right. If you're experiencing what love is, then you know that love is what created you because that's what you're experiencing, right? So you know that love goes on forever, right? Or you're gonna start losing what it is you're giving love to. So the less love you have in yourself is the less love you have in the mirror of what's in that mirror. And eventually that mirror goes black. Now we're back to smoke and mirrors. Right? Fracture of souls, sacral souls, animus fragments. So I was watching this because it's interesting, because it's like they keep, you know what, Pat, you know the movie that I talked about? It actually is a very great movie to see how it works. In this respect, it's actually a short little documentary that I would probably put in a 4th or 5th grade class. Okay? Because it's only not even about a 45-minute film. And you can learn a lot in 45 minutes. And so the name of that sequel was called Patterns by Rod Serling. Patterns, which are geometric patterns of sound, right? Sound and light, as to whether they're in balance. So you see how the competitive side of this works with corporations, because that's why Wildland Fire was saying LLC. I'm a limited liability corporation. That means that when they hire one of these firefighters, and it doesn't matter whether you go to work for the city, the county, the state, or the federal government, they need to be told up front, you sign on this X dotted line, which is X-Men, Geek Squad simulation off of quantum intelligence. It means what you're going to experience going to fight fire, and that's how they want it. Fight fire. I am fire. So I'm not fighting myself. I'm not at war with myself. Okay? So that's how when they get into forced firefighting, fighting fire. No, I am fire. I'm not fighting myself. I'm not at war with myself in my own mirror against fire. So you see in how one of the other videos, they reinforce that programming. Hey, yeah, I'm a firefighter. I'm a hero. They're all our heroes. Fighting fire. Yeah, we're not made of fire. No, we're fighting fire. That's reverse programming. That's reversal current. And that's how they maintain the suction pipe. That's right. Inverted language. That's one of the reasons why when I was a child, I realized that I didn't want to have to put this language in memory because of what you already know it represents. But in order for me to be able to communicate in a language that millions of others that have been programmed to speak and understand and translate that language, I was going to have to do that. Remember I covered that one time when I was young of choosing what to put in memory, what not to put in memory? So you know that fire is what burns off stuff that doesn't belong there, right? To maintain your crystalline shield, which is a diamond sun rose heart, right? Rose, baby. Pink roses, mama. Going pink. Yeah. That's why it's not a coincidence that Yellow Rose calls herself Yellow Rose, right? And so you can see when they were putting this documentary and what happened with these folks that got entrapped. And coincidentally enough, or ironically enough, it was early in the year in Yellowstone. Anybody that's been up to Yellowstone know you're at a higher elevation. And when you're up there in the springtime or even in May, even June, okay, depending on which year it happens to be, you can still find snow. Which means it doesn't normally run real hot because I lived up there. I used to live up in Idaho Falls, Idaho, and was up there almost every weekend, up in the Yellowstone, the Grand Tetons and all that. So I'm very familiar with Yellowstone area for other reasons. So this was earlier in the year, okay, and this was, I forget how many years ago, but it was called the Madison Arm Fire, where two fire engines, and a dozer crew got trapped. So when they do what's called a post-hazard analysis, which means how did we get trapped? Now we go back to Firescope in 1970. Because what they said was, after Firescope, was that it's communications, the language of DNA, the lines of communication between LA City, LA County, CAL FIRE, U.S. Forest Service, Anaheim City Fire Department, Orange County Fire, we're not communicating with each other. So, for example, a strike team of engines, back then they were called a task force. 5 engines are coming down from LA County on a 100,000 acre in San Diego County. But now we get into what we call nets, just like throwing a net out to catch some fish when the tide's low, and then when the high tide comes in, hey, and I go back out there when it's low tide, look what I got for free. Now I can go sell it, and I just made a bundle using a network. Yeah, see? And so they realized that the reason in that particular year that they lost so much insurance money, or you realize they're gamblers, they gamble on futures because in their mind, they have a future, see? So they gamble between past, present, and future, which is based on time, links to time density, multidimensionally, and density to maintain contact with what they're aware of with other beings, right? Using machines and technology that is alien machinery. And so the communications was the central hub, which means we lose anybody, we lose any watershed value, we lose anything that's related to money. Man, we're losing more of what we accumulate. We can't be losing. We got to keep gaining more mass and density. Become more solid state, right? And so communications was what they looked at. And they said, LA City can't talk to a bat chief, a battalion chief in San Diego County working for Cal Fire. They operate on a different what? Network. Okay, so what are we going to do? Bring it under the Uniform Commercial Code. Oh, make it all fake. Yeah, we'll make it all fake. Fiction, black robes, fiction. Remember when they banned spirit? Remember when they banned spirit, math, and physics? The Vatican did that. Remember the split between East and West? Constantinople, Constantine, fall of the Roman Empire. Remember that? When the native tribes got together, time walkers, going to turn the into pillars of salt. They surrendered, right? Then their title was sold back to them, which was a permit to operate again. When was that? 15th century, right? Then you can sort of go forward and see what happened after that with Turtle Island. You know, when Columbus, killing fields across America, pillage and plunder one to the other, put everybody under one corporate umbrella stand. You understand who the umbrella stands are represented by. All you got to do is go to the ACIO, right? And so out of this, it was imposed on them, imposed because they don't have a choice because they're basically puppets. You know what a puppet master is, right? They're all expendables below, right? The pyramid, top of the pyramid. So they're basically puppets. They're all expendables because the last one at the top is going to make sure that everybody else is sacrificed at the bottom. So that's the last one standing. What has he got left? Nothing. Because they'll keep feeding on it. That's called cannibalism. Just keep cannibalizing on whatever energy is left, which includes all of its expendables until it's the last man standing. Bye. It's like letting the air out of the balloon. Because you got to count for your ledger, right? Between the X and the Y, your chromosomes, right? The balance between the magnets. So if your balance aren't magnets, and you can't zero yourself out so that you are in balance in your water worlds, right? You want to be on the positive side of the ledger, like big time. The more energy you keep giving away, the more of everything else is experiencing who you are, which is the one. Which is a line of communication that got lost on the template, Yeah, what's her name covered that? Mutations, mutagenic effects. So now we're back to lines of communication. So in 1970, as a result of Firescope, what they decided to do was we're going to put the entire global umbrella stand under one line of communication, which is called their Skynet, which is called their QI, which is all cyberspace, which is Cyber Command. Okay? Which means they're imposing their will on everybody here without their consent, whether you like it or not. And that is a violation of love is a law. Okay? So now you see how that played out in that movie that I showed, or that cyborg who was like a staff sergeant, like a Patty Broussard, who now remembers what love is, that love is the highest law. Okay? So that particular cybernetic unit decided to basically tell the QY to piss up a rope. You know what pissing up a rope is? Piss up a rope. I honor a higher law. The girl that's in my ship that you wanted to terminate. But I honor a higher law than the QI military code. I honor the law of one. That's the highest code of honor there is. So that cybernetic unit honored the highest law. Took its helmet off. That would be the same as a super soldier taking its helmet off and saying, I honor the highest code of honor. I honor love as a law. The one. The one came first, joined in marriage with Eve, with the goddess, to become one with all creation. He remembered. Okay? That's why all this is happening. That's what's called living in the truth. Living in the truth is living in the light, which is what love is. It goes on forever, loving you and me and all of us. And that's what it's part to be a part of the all creation that we give love to. That's why it's the law, because it's the law of least effort. And that's physics, and the math doesn't lie. And so what happened after 1970 was they wanted to bring everybody under that umbrella by using one mass communication system, right? They connected everybody. Now you get into all the stuff about Parsay, the lawsuit that he filed in San Diego Federal District Court. When was that, Karen? About 4 or 5 years ago. Listed Google, everything, every Facebook, everything that's here. Okay? And how fast, and if you will, what they call an acceleration of a singularity of consciousness, which essentially means hive mind, group think. Okay? Whatever independent thought or your ability to create whatever you want, and then let's experience it, which basically means if you wanted to go out, in other words, if you don't want to follow the crowd, I don't want to be with all these other folks. I got other things I can do with my energy. I'm a creative musician. I think I'm going to go somewhere in Siberia and go find some way to produce some different kinds of sounds on my own that have never been produced before, and I'm free to go do that. I don't have to follow you folks. That's a free spirit. So what you realized over time, as I did when I was a child, there were less and less spaces that you could go where they weren't there with their gun, their badge, and wanting money. So you're finding less and less places where you could go where they weren't in your face. See? Those are your RoboCops. That's your Minority Report. That's Rise of the Machines. That's Halo. That's the Atom Project. Cyber Wars, Avatar. Throw it all in. Throw all those movies right into the blender and spin it all. Right? See what comes out. Just like throwing dice on a crap table, right? 7, you're out. You lose. No, 7, you win. See? And so that's the fakery. So they wanted everybody under an incident command system, which is why they rearranged the deck chairs on the Titanic with the language in the Forest Service, Cal State Fire. And I was there when all this was being put together, and naturally it isn't a coincidence, right? So when they did the post-hazard analysis afterwards, the whole reason that they were using to justify in everybody else's minds by putting up all of their microphones, cell phone towers, all the G stuff, all the phones and laptops and Apples and PCs and everything else that everybody was going to start running. They don't care whether or not you're using a computer to help heal other people in China. Okay? They don't. But as long as your state of consciousness is held trapped within a QI system upon which that's the system that you're using in which to do what it is that you do through the communication technology, means that you're trapped into that QI system. And they're happy with that. Okay? So I know the difference between what I am and what I'm not. Because we predate all that technology. Okay? It's like the other video that I did about time and density and speed. So I realized that there are different beings, different spiritual beings that were represented by souls that operate on different levels of consciousness. Or if you will, different levels that is determined by the amount of, as Yellow Rose calls it, spiritual fat. Okay? Or if you will, the amount of soul energy that is represented by your soul. I'm an oversoul. Okay? So I lit myself on fire to remind myself of who I am, but it's not like I didn't know because I wouldn't have known how to do that. But it's like, remember, I took the headset off and said, I'm done with them. So that means you know what side your bread is buttered on. So I'm always with the girl, okay? The girl always lives in my heart, so I'm a pink rose, right? So I know how to communicate as a father the same way I know how to communicate as a mother, right? And so like when mama puts her foot down, and she did, that's enough. It's no different than when you have parasites in your gut, right? And I did a flush. I realized that after I did my 2016 lighting myself on fire, okay, that I was going to go, when you realize that you're a monopole and you're a polarity integrator, so you imagine how much has to get flushed, or actually what I call burn off of codes, transfer codes, bugs, all the things that you get exposed to here that would represent what would be an underworld. You know, if you were going to define and try and translate what it would be like to come into a place in which you're being exposed to things that you know that from where I come from, you never experience. So now you're delineating everything that isn't what love is, that you're experiencing, that is draining your energy, or something that you see on the visible light spectrum that shows up on you. How the fuck did that get there? Right? Codes, code activations as a result of exposure. Okay. It gets activated. You know what an activator is? Like, hey, you want to color your hair? It needs an activator, right? You want to build a fiberglass boat? Well, it needs a catalyst, right? Like a resin codes, glue codes. Hold it together so it's a little more solid, so that you can use it as a fiberglass surfboard and go hit a wave with a rail, right? Running the lines of communication in a tube, lava tubes. And so they wanted everybody under a global communication system. That now everybody can communicate with each other, right? So there was a method to their madness, because that's what they are, mad men, which means they're always selling you something, always selling you something. So, you know, every time they're selling you something, they're needing money, and that's what kept their money system going, right? So now they use that money by being able to hire more beings that are now working for them, that are doing the work for them that they want those worker bees to do in order to build a system that we're experiencing in the future, right? Which is to build the trap, build the mouse trap they can't get out of, build the maze. They're not going to be able to get out of this one, right? Because they realize without us, they don't exist, so they need our energy in which to do it. Because they don't know how to create anything out of old cloth. So now you can see the difference between those that have souls and those that don't. And why is it those that have soul are so valuable? By virtue of graphing. Oh, look what this soul can do. Oh, man, this one, we're throwing everything at this one. Just like Patty was showing the graph. Look at all the damage we're doing to this guy. Look at all the damage you're doing to this girl. Man, somehow or other, this one's being able to survive it. It's a pretty smart cookie. Right? So they get all that data. So they can see if they can use that data to do what? Generate other codes. Right? Program that into something. Right? Other versions of Blade Runners. To keep the illusion alive for X. That's what they do. That's the only way that they can find a way to keep up. Is what we call hand-me-downs. You know what a hand-me-down is, right? Man, look what they created. Whoa. Whoa. Hey, look what we got our hands on. Anybody know how to engineer? Anybody ever? Who the hell engineered this? It's actually pretty simple. Oh, but you got to be running enough fire to be able to run this, or it won't work for you. Boy, that's a pretty smart girl. That's higher intelligence. Well, how high does that intelligence get? Well, imagine how high that intelligence gets when it's on fire to create. That means that the math is built in to make sure that the dark doesn't collapse it. Otherwise, it burns itself up by default, by virtue of the choices that it makes in which to do that. That's why they fear fire. That's why I said in that documentary, we attack the fire. Initial attack, right? I learned, I programmed all that language. I was putting it in memory. Yeah, initial attack. I'm an initial attack, initial response. Jump in that Cobra helicopter, right? We're on the attack. Remember the movie Apocalypse Now? and playing that song. What was that? I think that was a Beethoven song or a Bach song, right? So I mean, this is the shit they throw in our faces. Beautiful music while they're mowing people down, presenting death cult and using beautiful music in which to do it. Imagine how people were processing that kind of convoluted stuff, right? Yeah. So when you get what's convoluted, it's just like a mismatch. It's like throwing a bunch of junk into a blender, see what comes out of it, and then throw it up against the wall and see if it sticks. Right? Make any sense out of that? That's called the language of mutation. Debris fields, DNA debris fields. That's right. And that's why, as a monopole, polarity integrator's got to transmute and burn off all that goo. All the stuff that fractures and 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 fractures. And we experience the result here, huh? So I know in Alcoholics Anonymous, we used to talk about higher power. Whatever your notion, whatever your belief system is, no matter where you come from, that's why they try to keep it as neutral as they could for a reason. Which means it doesn't matter where you come from. We realize that you're duking it out with the demon you got in you. You're possessed by a demon. A demon is influencing what you do every day. Did you know that? Yes, I did know that. Is there anything left inside that vessel that's alive? A live one? Yeah. Okay, so you know what the truth is then. Is that right? Yeah. Well, how much of that truth is still living in you? How much of that light you got left in you? Enough. Enough to be truthful? Yeah. Can you be truthful with yourself? Yeah. I don't lie to myself because I got to live with me. Good. That's first base. Because you're on a soul's journey. That's right. My spirit's protecting my soul. My spirit knows what the truth is. There's still some light in me. I know what the truth is. Love is what the truth is. I know I'm in the right place. It's going to take me a while to get rid of all this, to restore myself. I know that. One day at a time, 1 minute at a time, 1 second at a time. Because I know what this demon wants to do. I know what this demon wants to do. I know what this demon wants to do is keep feeding on me, feeding on me, feeding on me, and feeding on me until I'm gone. I know, I got to restore. Go the other way, go the other way. I know the right pathway. I know. And you're being bombarded daily by billboard signs, TVs, so that programming is still being self-reinforced because the temptation is still there. Oh man, I got to follow that program app. Oops, got to follow that program. That's called activation. Oh man, I got to clear a lot of junk. That's called clearing your cabinet. Your cab, you know what a cab is in Windows. Go open it up. Go look at the cab. C3, and then you have AB the way that they do it, but it's reverse. Inverted. The kernel, like a corn kernel. You know, the master files, the original template codes, right? Access to the Emerald Founder records, right? Now you're back in key codes, access codes, and the honor code. You see, even with their QI, the ACIO and those folks, they don't have the same access. For self-evident reasons. Emerald Founder Records is known as Special Access. Special Access is Special Forces. That's the allied forces of mankind. They don't have cosmic level clearance. Okay? For self-evident reasons. Self-evident reasons. The evidence of their self-serve is the evidence of the reasons why they don't have access. So when you're a single pole as a mated chip, gifting electrons forever on behalf of the one, then you are the one that gives you access to eternity, because now you're experiencing eternity. That means that you have chosen to become an oversoul. Once you're an oversoul, it means that your consciousness can never be used to do something against the one, because now you're the one. Now you would never do anything against yourself to harm yourself by virtue of what you do to others. And that's how it works. Yeah, and so I'm really tempted to sit down, if I can get myself down to a keypad, a larger one, where I can crank out a news memo, a news brief, a news flash. Remember a flash, the hat with the flash, the lightning bolt? And draft a template and find out who the chief of the Forest Service is, U.S. Forest Service. And just try and see if I can make it into a, just like they use resumes, make it short and bullet. You know why they went to resumes where they want them on one pages? You know why they wanted to go to the shorter format with just big bullets and stuff like that? You want the short answer? Tunnel vision. Right? Just make it short and sweet. And if their library is big enough, the one that they operate on, based on how big their soul is, will determine how much of that library they're able to be aware of at once, in which it's all connected. Wow. You've been around a few galaxies, haven't you? Well, you might be an asset, but then again, I might lose my job if I hired you. On the other hand, you might run a more fruitful and thriving organization than I would. Oh, so now we're into orgs, organizational structures like the ACIO, the Alien Intelligence Organization. What do they call that? Advanced contact. Oh, advance. Does this mean they're out actively searching for life in some place that's in the unknown? Known unknowns? Okay. Oh, man. I know. I know. It's bad. I know, Mama. It's bad. I know how bad it is. Now we got mud fossils showing really some beautiful stuff. When you think, and I've mentioned this before about being in the womb of a goddess, right? Okay, so like I mentioned about how I had large worms coming out of my, out of the, I call it out of the pipe because that's what it is. It's an orifice, a larger one, right? You're getting rid of the waste product of being in a toxic zone, right? And so when you're exposed to all this junk, your body wants to get rid of it. So the faster that you're getting rid of waste product, right, the higher the speed. You're maintaining the higher speed of what you're aware of, right? So that's called burn off. So you can imagine when you're not even in a physical body, right? And so that's like, man, no time. You don't need to get rid of anything. The purest of energy, the purest of consciousness, the purest of presentation. That's like pure fire. But you got to find a way to cool yourself down. You burn the house down. Yeah. And so in other words, their fakery does not apply to us. Okay? I mean, when I put this in the context of being 4 years of age, it's just like, oh, Mama, please. I don't want to do this. Serious. But here we are, right? And so, remember, I've said this before. We're measuring the success of how we're doing. How are we doing, Mama? How are we doing, Mama? We're getting it, Mama. We're getting it. So when the Mud Fossils guy was showing the stuff about how the breakdown of constituents, if you start with something that was animated or alive and living in spirit with a soul, right, then you're seeing it in live action. The living live action. live action. And then Mud Fossils shows you the breakdown. Okay, breakdown, right? What did we used to call that? Decomposition? Decompose. You know what a sound composer is? A composer, right? And then in decomposition, return to the soil, right? And then it gets regurgitated and gets recycled with water cycles and the carbon cycles here, right? Hydrocarbons, all that, right? So it's a transformation, right? Ashes to ashes, dust to dust, stars and stardust. And now we're back to the elementals, right? So in other words, there is higher intelligence at work here that can manage the math, if you will, and the music to maintain what? Balance, harmony within all the water worlds from which the DNA is born into that world out of fire. So fire and water, liquid light, liquid firelight. Yeah, pure as it gets. That's pure water, pure spirit and water. That's pure consciousness, by the way. That's as pure as it gets, and that's a lot of fire. That's what we are. Those are purifiers that do purifying work. And that's what allows others to experience the truth. Love is the truth. So we tell no lies. Have a good evening. Bye.